Morning everybody, welcome to Tolpuddle 2021, the first talk of the day. We're actually here behind the museum. I'm here with Jo, and our first talk is resetting the world of work. I think that's something which is really important to us all at the moment, how we're going to move into this next phase. With so much having changed. I'm really pleased to say that we've got some speakers with us today. We've got Kate Bell, the TUC Head of Rights and International Social Employment. We've got Rayner Mp, Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, Shadow Secretary of State for the Future of Work. We've got Darren Jones Mp, the Chair of the Business Select Committee. We've got Norris, West of England Metro Mayor, and Kaye, South West UNISON Regional Secretary. So thank you so much for joining us this morning. Please do get involved with our social media. Let us know that you're watching. Let us know where you're watching from. So I'll go straight to our first speaker. Thank you for joining us, and a very big welcome to Angela.
Well, it's an absolute honour to be here, even if it is virtually, and I'm not going to take up too much of your time because my friend Darren Jones, who's on shortly, is out in the sunshine. Now, he's not that far away from Dorset, he's definitely nearer than I am, and in Manchester, if I go outside now, I burn up, so he's going to end up with one of those big beamy heads by the time I finish. No, he's got his facts of 50, we're all right. I'll take 5 minutes longer then, Darren. I miss being with my friends and comrades so much, and I miss the buzz of the festival, and this is my second virtual one, so I'm hoping that next year we'll be able to look forward to meeting again in person. But I hope the Prime Minister will not make it more difficult with his spineless approach to leadership in this crisis. I mean, he is a true danger to this country with his reckless approach. But comrades, I was raised by the trade union movement, and it turned my life around. It gave me a purpose, a direction, and a voice. I was raised in poverty on a council estate and left school already pregnant with no qualifications. The union really did become my family. And I was able to fight for my colleagues in social care to get a fair deal and to be safe at work and to ensure they felt valued. And boy, have we gone backwards since then. There is no political force, I believe, more powerful than the togetherness that I have felt from our movement and the trade union movement. It is the story of the working class. We come together, we support each other, and we fight for better. And I'm so proud that many years after the Tolpuddle Martyrs, we are still here standing up for working people. And of course, we can only be here today because of our excellent people. So before I dive into the future of work, I know we've had a few technical difficulties, but I want to say a massive, huge thank you to Innes, Nigel, Tanya, Gary, and the technical team for all the work that they've put into getting this weekend ready. And you can imagine how panicky they all are now when we've had these technical difficulties. But it's our jobs as panelists to make it worth the while for people. So if everyone gets grumpy afterwards, it's not your fault, technicians, it's because we were rubbish. That's all I'm going to say. And of course, an absolute special thank you to our lovely chair, Hannah, which hopefully I'll hear at some point during this session. Hannah, I didn't think anyone could silence you, my friend, but it just so happened to have happened today. So it's absolutely great we're here. Now, since I've been made the Secretary of State for Future of Work, alongside a few other jobs that you might know, I've been working through what a Labour vision for work in the future looks like. I know that the problems are insecurity, unpredictability, exploitation, inequality, poor pay, and poor protections. All of these problems have been made deeper by the pandemic, but make no mistake, 11 years of Tory government created a labour market that was fundamentally flawed even before the coronavirus. Now, we are the party of Labour, so it isn't a surprise that a fair, safe, secure, prosperous future for workers will be one of our central policy pledges, and I'm incredibly excited to lead on that work. And over the last few months, my colleagues, especially Andy MacDonald and I, have been engaging with our trade unions to create a set of policies that set the tone for a modern, flexible and well-paid future for workers, It won't just fall on our laps, comrades. We've got to fight for it. And over the summer, I'll be launching some of those policies alongside the rest of the Shadow Cabinet and our leader, Kaye Starmer. We want to fix the problems I listed, and we know that we have the solutions because they were built alongside our trade unions and workers on the front line. The public deserve better than what Boris Johnson and the Tories are offering. Empty words and slogans about levelling up, raising nothing but the shameful child poverty rates that we've seen, and they're only caring about jobs when they're given to their mates. That's the truth of this government. And as restrictions lift, we adjust to a new normal, and it won't be the same. And we need a new deal for working people. Our alternative is about giving workers the rights they deserve from the moment they step into a job, committing to skills and training at every single stage of people's working life, and a fair pay that does not see working people struggling. We want to see flexible working as a standard. This must mean enshrining the right to flexible working and a duty on employers to accommodate this unless there is a very good reason, a certain job that cannot be done flexibly. Working flexibly doesn't just mean laptops at the kitchen table. It means letting people arrange their work around their life. It's giving people autonomy and freedom. And it means embracing technology that makes people's lives easier. And alongside the right to work flexibly is the right to disconnect from work. We cannot see working people made to respond to messengers or engage with bosses outside of contractual working hours. It is bad for our health, physical and mental, to be overworked. It's important for our families as well and the communities that workers are able to have secure time away from their work, and a Labour government would enshrine that right. The workplace must also be a place of equality, and I was so proud to launch Labour's Equal Recovery Pledge alongside Marsha Dicadova to protect and promote gender equality at work as we recover from the pandemic. We were the party that embarked on this in government, and we will be the party that finishes that work in the next Labour government. And it is time for radical transformative policies that reverse the gender equality that has been supercharged by the pandemic. We need a modern set of legislation that ensures equal pay and pay transparency. And we need to immediately reinstate the gender pay gap reporting and introduce ethnicity pay gap reporting. We need to review parental leave rights, and we need the government to do this work now. We all do better when equality is at the heart of our policy. And quite frankly, it's a shameful fact that there are working people in this country that are not paid enough to eat well, heat their home and raise their family. These are the basics. Children going hungry in one of our richest countries in the world. This should never, ever happen. The minimum wage is not enough. George Lovelace and his comrades fought for 10 shillings, and Labour will demand at least £10 an hour. An honest day's pay for an honest day's work. Enough to eat well, enjoy leisure time, and live a good life. Now, comrades, I was told off not long ago for calling a member of Parliament on the opposite benches scum in the debate around children's school meals, and I had to apologise, so I apologise for saying it in the chamber because apparently that's unparliamentary. But the reason I did it was because it matters to me. When I was young, I used to go out with my friends and I'd go to their house and say, will you ask your mum and dad if I can stay for dinner in the school holidays? And they'd come back out and they'd say, my mum says she can't stay today because she stayed yesterday. And I'd sit on the curb outside their house and wait for them to finish their dinner, hungry to the pit of my stomach. I didn't ask to be born into poverty. Those children that Mark Rashford was fighting for recently don't ask to be put in the position that they're in. And when this Tory government think it's political point scoring, they've never been that child that sat on that curb that didn't get that dinner. It's personal because so many children deserve far more better than they're getting today. That's what we're fighting for, comrades. It's the future of working people in this country who provide the wealth for this country and deserve so much better than crumbs off the table while the Tories' mates and donors get rich. And comrades, our vision is not complicated. We do not ask for too much. We want every person in this country to have a job that is decent, dignified, secure, and pays them enough to thrive. And we should never, ever shy away from that. If Boris Johnson can have really expensive, ridiculous wallpaper in his house, then a social care worker can demand to be paid enough to heat her house. Our central purpose as a party and as a movement will be a future where everyone has a decent and prosperous working life. And comrades, with your help, we will fight for that every single day until we're next in government, and then we will deliver it. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Angela. You made some really wonderful points there, and thank you for being with us. So on to our next speaker. I'm really pleased to welcome Kate Bell.
I'm really sad I can't be there in person. It looks much more fun to be sitting on a straw bale than it does in my house. It's also just such a huge pleasure to follow Angela and hear once again about her dedication for the cause of improving workers' rights and of course for our movement as well. I thought I'd start off by talking a little bit about the world of work today, and some of the realities of that have really been brought home for me this week. We organised a briefing on sick pay for MPs this week. It's an issue we've been campaigning on throughout the pandemic. It's frankly shocking that the government is still letting people live on £96 a week of sick pay. And we had a really great union rep, Zoe from the GMB, who was a care worker. And one of the things that Zoe said to us, which I can't stop thinking about, is that in one of the care homes she represents, the workers there have decided that because they don't qualify for sick pay, they're going to organise a kitty between themselves. So they all put aside £5 a week from their pretty minimal wages in order to buy food for each other if one of them goes off sick. And I just think it's so shocking that that's the reality of working life today. It's those workers showing collective solidarity, but in a way that they absolutely should not have to. And unfortunately, we know that that type of experience is common for far too many workers. We've still got 3.6 million people in insecure work. We've got 10% of the workforce facing fire and rehire. We've got 4 in 10 key workers earning less than £10 an hour. And just this week, we had research out showing that 1 million kids in key worker families are living below the poverty line. We've still got 1.6 million people unemployed. We've still got 1 million people on furlough. And we've got a situation highlighted again this week where racism is still a reality in far too many workplaces, whether you're on the pitch or you're one of the many supporters who unfortunately has that kind of abuse as their daily reality. And I think the coronavirus pandemic, like Angela said, hasn't created these problems, but it's certainly exposed them. And I think where we are now is at a real kind of decision time. We can either choose to go on as we have before, we can choose to carry on with the outsourcing model, with the austerity model, with the lack of employment rights that have driven down workers' terms and conditions and pushed us into this situation. Or we can actually choose to build back better and put that now kind of bit of a cliche words into reality. And I think, as Angela said, we know what we need to do if we do want to build back better. It's not complicated. We know we could start by banning 0 hours contracts. TUC has been campaigning on this for a long time. It's absolutely shocking that so many people still don't know when they'll be working each week, still don't know how much money they'll have coming in, still don't know when they can arrange their childcare, when they're going to get to spend time with their families, because their employer has got them at their beck and call. And we could make that the start of an employment bill that went so much further to give people decent rights across the board, to end fire and rehire. We also know we could invest in the new jobs that we absolutely need in this country. And I think it's really important that we remember that we're facing two really major crises at the moment. We've got the climate crisis, of course, and I think it's hard not over the past few weeks when we've been seeing fire in the United States and floods in Europe to really have the reality of that brought home to us. But we know that the urgent action we need to tackle that is also action that could be delivering us decent jobs. So our research shows that investing 85 billion in essential climate infrastructure could deliver over 1 million jobs over the next 2 years, whether they're in clean forms of transport, whether they're in reforestation, whether they're in delivering our industrial base, delivering our manufacturing in cleaner, greener ways. These should be delivering us decent, clean, good jobs if we make that investment now, and it's absolutely vital we do that. And those will be jobs right across the country. We've also seen that we're facing a crisis of care. It's not just the experience of Zoe and the care workers she works with. 25% of them are on 0 hours contracts. Many are earning less than a living wage. But that's also affecting the people who are cared for. And of course, we've seen that with absolutely tragic consequences during the pandemic. But we know that investing in a decent care workforce, investing in our care sector and investing in the wider public sector, again, could be delivering us new, decent, good quality jobs right across the country. And just by filling existing vacancies and getting the public sector back up to the strength it was in 2010 before that decade of austerity, we could be delivering 600,000 decent, new, good quality jobs. And I think it's absolutely vital that we all make the case for those investments now, because not only are they the investments we need, but they're investments that will be delivering the decent work we want to see. But I think most importantly, and Angela talked about this, we know that it's giving workers back the collective power that's been taken away from them by strengthening our trade union rights that's actually going to deliver us the decent work we need. We've seen trade unions really stepping up through this pandemic, whether it's stepping in to protect workers' health and safety when employers were asking them to work unsafely, whether it's for fighting better sick pay and for better sick pay across the care sector and winning, thousands of pounds of new sick pay for members who otherwise wouldn't have been able to afford to self-isolate, whether it's tackling the fire and rehire that employers have been using the crisis as an excuse to impose on workers, or winning better wages, even at a time when we keep being told that employers can't afford it. We saw that £10 an hour deal at Morrison's, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be seeing that across the economy. So we know when we talk about the future of work, the first thing we have to do is get those trade union rights back. We know that our collective power is our greatest strength, and allowing unions access to workplaces is still shamefully denied. So those organisers outside Amazon having to stand outside, not allowed onto the workplace to tell people about the benefits of joining a trade union. We know that should be just the first step in the extension of collective rights we need so that people can fight for the change that they need and they deserve. So to summarise, and I did want to be brief, we know the crisis has exposed the massive problems that we face in the world of work. For many of the people listening to this, those will be familiar, but I think it's been really brought home to us just the magnitude of them and really the impact of them, not just on the lives of those workers, but on our public services and on the type of society we are. We know what we need to do to build back better. We need that investment, we need those new rights. But most of all, we need the collective power that we know trade unions can deliver. And that's what we're going to be fighting for. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much, Kate. It's always really great to listen to you speak. So thank you very much for that. And now we're ready for our next speaker. We've got Darren Jones Mp.
Well, it's great to be with you all at Tolpuddle again, sadly virtually this year. I'm trying to replicate the experience by being in my garden getting slightly sunburnt, although drinking tea, not cider at this time of the morning. And I look forward to being back at Tolpuddle again in person very, very soon. It's great to be on this panel in particular to follow from Angela Rayner, who set out such an important set of policies there that she and the front bench are working on and will be announcing as part of the summer of getting around the country with Kaye and the rest of the Shadow Cabinet, talking to people across the country and also setting out what a Labour government will do. It's also great to be here with Dan Norris, our new Labour regional mayor, here where I'm sat in the west of England, a really important gain for us at the last set of regional and local elections, and in areas where we need to make important progress to make sure that we deliver that Labour government as well. And Kate, as always, excellent. Kate appears before my committee on a number of occasions and provides us with all of the answers. And so it's always a pleasure to be on a panel with Kate as well. And thanks as always to Hannah and the TT Southwest for setting up the call this morning. So I've been asked to talk about the future of work from the perspective of my day job, or part of my day job, holding the business department to account in Westminster. And when I was thinking about how I wanted to approach that, I thought, how will I put it in a nutshell? And essentially, what we see all the time is you see these big macro trends affecting the economy, jobs, people's work around technology and around climate change, and now about pandemic and the legacy of pandemic. And in the middle of all of that, there's a host of opportunities and lots of challenges. And the government are in such a mess that they seem to miss both of them. They don't deal with the challenges and they're not seeking the opportunities. And instead, they're just kind of bumbling through with sound bites and culture war attacks because they have no real economic analysis. They have no real understanding about how they're going to deliver what they keep promising people. On levelling up, we saw the Prime Minister's speech this week, where he essentially said nothing at all. They have not translated that from a political slogan into a programme for government, and people will cotton on that the Conservatives are taking the mick out of them. When it comes to industrial policy, the government scrapped the industrial strategy in the budget, in a footnote to the budget, not even the courtesy of a statement to the House and to people across the country about why they were scrapping the industrial strategy, and therefore what the government thinks about industrial policy and its role in supporting workers in key industries across the country. And all of these are examples of this just kind of bumbling nature, not actually getting a grip on the country and making sure that it works for working people. So what do I think some of those opportunities are, and what do I think some of those challenges are that I think the government should address? On the opportunity side, we know that technology provides lots of new jobs and lots of new skills and training opportunities for people across the country. It can improve the way we do our work, it can modernize the way we deliver our public services, but we don't have the skills and training in place to make the most of it. And so what happens is it becomes a challenge because people are affected by technology instead of affecting it. And people are there, if you're in retail or in advanced manufacturing, or even in parts of the public sector now, your job might be changing at such a speed that there's not an opportunity for you to retrain and reskill into the new types of jobs that are coming. And the government doesn't seem to think that it's its role to put in place support to help people do that on a national scale. Where we have active regional mayors with devolved adult skills budgets, which I'm sure Dan will talk about, we can do things locally. But the government doesn't seem to step in to help at a national level. And we see this especially on the net zero transition. This is, again, the Conservatives say that they support climate action, but they're not actually doing anything to tackle it quickly enough. Again, like levelling up, another political slogan without any policy behind it. And on some of the big issues around net zero, whether it's about the future for jobs in steel. I visited Port Talbot in Wales the other week, whether it's about boilers being changed in our homes because we've got to decarbonise our heating. The government isn't putting in the effort to announce the policy direction that's required, the money that's needed to make that happen in a fair and just way for consumers and citizens, but also really importantly then, to help train up the workers that then need to do those jobs. And that's a huge opportunity. Decarbonising our heating is one of the most important climate change actions we have to do in our country. That's going to involve someone going into each and every house across the whole country to help people understand what options they have available to them, what financial support should be in place, and how they then can get their boiler changed. Why are we not training apprentices right across the country in every single community? Why are we letting companies like Centrica British Gas use fire and rehire tactics to basically bully their staff into new terms and conditions? The government on fire and rehire said that they thought it was wrong, but then they didn't do anything about it. And there was this remarkable statement in the House of Commons. Paul Scully, who's a Conservative business minister, came and gave a speech in the House of Commons, which was literally titled "The Future of Workers' Rights." And he stood up and said that the Tories were the party of the workers. And in his speech, he said absolutely nothing at all. And my question to him at the end was, could you tell me, Minister, in 12 months' time, what will change as a consequence of the statement you've made today? And all he could tell me was that ACAS has been asked to update its guidance on how it's appropriate to use fire and rehire, as opposed to banning it from being used. Completely and utterly hopeless. And so what does this actually mean for people? It means that the pace of change, whether it's about technology or the commitment to the net zero transition, and that's right to make action on climate change, becomes a problem. And it should become an opportunity. It should fill people with hope and inspiration because they know their kids have got access to training in their local community. They know there'll be work, well-paid work, unionized work that they'll be able to do in their local community. They can see it as an opportunity for change, an opportunity for good pay, an opportunity for a better life, not just in work, but in the communities in which we live, in the environment in which we live. But instead, there is a sense of confusion and a sense of concern and a sense of pushback, which will make it much harder for everybody involved. And lastly, just to say, on this issue of industrial policy and how it works with trade unions, at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, Conservative ministers would appear before my committee and say to me, look, Darren, we're engaging actively with the trade unions. And they were to begin with. They're not anymore. And at the moment, if you don't know what the government's going to do for big employers, for big sectors, and the trade unions aren't being listened to, not being invited in to co-produce policy responses to helping people, this is just not going to work. And one really awful example of this was the government scrapping the Union Learning Fund, a hugely successful example of in-work training for people provided by trade unions, capturing people when they're in work and need skills development before they have to either find new work or go elsewhere. And the government scrapped it. Why? They had no rationale for that at all. I think it was just the government being ideologically spiteful. And so you've got all of this, as I say, bumbling narrative across the top. But when you really look at the detail of policy, of money, of regulatory reform, of working with trade unions and workers and even businesses, to be honest, to try and get this right for the country, it's just not there. And so you see this, and I just think every single day, this is why all of us need to work so hard to secure a Labour government, because we know what the answers are to many of these questions. As Angela and Kaye has said, they're not particularly difficult. It just requires a party in government that's willing to use the power of government to make people's lives better across the country, instead of just kind of faffing around and trying to get social media likes with culture war content, which is essentially what the Conservative Party is today. So,
really beautiful garden. And also just to say that as one of our Southwest MPs, we at the TUC really appreciate how much contact you have with us and when we get to do those talks with you. So please do, and thank you for joining us. So we can go to our next speaker now, who I believe can't hear me, but I still won't swear. Welcome, Dan Norris.
I think the interesting thing is that a child born today will have about 7 different careers in their lifetime. And we need, as a Labour Party and a trade union movement, to get our heads around that, to meet that challenge. And it seems very clear to me, particularly since becoming Metro Mayor for the West of England, is that we have to show that we have the policies, the ideas that recognise that challenge looking forward, and counterpoint it against what the Tories are not doing, as Darren eloquently outlined. And it's that challenge that I'm determined that as a West of England Metro Mayor and our other Labour Metro Mayors, that we show we have the answers to that. Because I believe this government is in decline. Things take time, but I believe they are in decline. And what's really important is that we are ready to take over when they collapse and fail. Which I believe is already on course. It's like a dam with the water building up behind. We can't see it, but when it bursts and breaks, we've got to be ready. So we need some good ideas. Now, I promised in my election manifesto that I would hold a jobs and skills summit within the first 100 days of being in office, and that's already happened. And what was very interesting was the importance of trade unions to making sure we shape the future. If we're going to have genuinely good, flexible working, whether that means working from home or part-time or the other ways that people can work flexibly, we need the trade unions to be very much involved as an interface between employers and workers to make sure we get the policies that really meet the needs of those who are in work and also the country, because actually our productivity will go up considerably, I believe, if we get that right. We also need to make sure that we have good horizon scanning to recognise the skills that are going to be needed in the future. It's hard to do, but as I went around my Jobs and Skills Summit, meeting some amazing organisations and people around the West Country, what was very clear was that almost everything nowadays involves a great deal of technology. So I went to a locksmith's, for example, and you would think that was just traditional cutting keys. And it's not just that anymore. It includes things like transponders, little circuits that can do amazing things to mean that locks can only be opened at certain times of the day or by certain people. So technology even affects something as simple as keys and locks. Similarly, I went to a car body shop where they train the students, the apprentices, on how to paint spray car body parts, but not using real spray, using computer graphics, and that saves obviously not wasting paint and protects the environment, but it allows the people who are training to get those skills repeatedly over and over again, much more quickly than they would if they used real paint. So again, those technology things are coming into every walk of life. Darren touched upon the need for skills in terms of the technologies that we know are going to have to come if we're going to hit our ambitious CO2 emissions targets, certainly in the West Country, of net zero by 2030. And he's absolutely right. And my fear is, and my job as Metro Mayor, is to make sure that we have enough skilled people able to support all that new technology. If we're going to have heat pumps, and if we're going to have different ways of heating our homes, driving our cars, etc., we need all those people who are going to keep electric cars on the road, that are going to be able to maintain and supply parts for heat pumps that are efficient. So that is a huge challenge for us, and something that Labour Metro Mayors, I think, are determined across the country to show that we can get right, so that we can lead by example, and hopefully sooner rather than later get that Labour government that's so important. The Apprenticeship Levy was something that Darren alluded to and mentioned even, and that is really important too. That is a shameful thing that's been taken away. As West of England Metro Mayor, I should be putting money in to replace that, so that that continues in some form or other. It's that important. And I think that's a significant thing to be doing to show that that really matters. I think we need to be quite careful about technology. I am actually very positive about it in the round, but I think it's our job in the Labour and trade union movement to make absolutely certain that the technological advances don't just benefit the owners, they actually benefit all of us. And that's the real challenge, I believe, of the next 20, 30, 40 years. As amazing, clever things come in, like quantum computers that can make billions of calculations every second and help us in all sorts of ways, like mapping out temperatures, reference climate change, and all the other things that will bring great solutions. What we've got to make sure is that the latest technology benefits all of us, not just those who own things and own companies. So that will be the real challenge. I think that's something that we as a party and a movement have to work really hard on now, to have clear answers for that, because that will be the question of our age. People will want to embrace new technology, I believe, but what they will realize is that if that's not done in a way that shares the benefits of the technology fairly across all parts of society, amongst all groups and all communities, that will be leading to trouble. And I think we've got work to do, as well as putting the Tories under pressure. We also have to make sure that we've got answers to those questions. And it's great to see people like Kate and Darren and Angela talking about all those important things that we need to be getting our heads around, so that we're ready for government. And I believe that we must work hard now, because although it's been a tough time for the Labour Party, as the West of England result has shown, we can do well, we can have success. And my belief is that that success in the West of England was because so-called levelling up actually isn't happening in the West of England, and people have rumbled it. So the Tories need to look carefully at that result, because I think it gives them a warning sign. We're not concerned about their welfare, we're concerned about the communities right across the country that we care about, making sure that they get the benefits that they deserve and the things that they need. But we need to make sure that we're ready for when the Tories crumble, because when it happens, it will happen very fast.
So thank you for that. Over to our next guest, who can definitely hear me. So thank you very much, Jo. Welcome. Please do talk.
Hi, thanks Hannah. It looks really idyllic sitting in these hay bales, but we're actually being kind of eaten alive by insects. So if you see us kind of scratching, bit subtly, then it does look the part, though, definitely. Although I did say to Hannah earlier, do you have hay fever, as her eyes were streaming?
I've got hay fever and hay in my hair, so
yes,
great.
So it's also marvellously here on site. I just really want to finish off by talking about the kind of 3 things we learned over the last 18 months in the pandemic about the world of work and what we need to learn going forward. And I think there were 3 lessons, which I kind of call the where, who, and what. Lessons about where people need to work, who, in terms of workers, are the real key workers that keep a society going, and what decent paying conditions look like. So starting off with the where, obviously the last 18 months, we've seen millions of people going out of their offices or their normal workplaces and carrying out their work from home. And these are often people who had been told for years that it wasn't possible to work from home, that they had to be in an office or in a particular workplace. For disabled workers, and particularly those with caring responsibilities, that was a huge issue. And suddenly we found out that when necessity is the mother of invention, that's the expression, that actually you can work at home, and with the appropriate support and equipment, everything works perfectly well, productivity is not affected, and actually jobs that can be done perfectly well at home, and for many people that really improved their working lives. But there was a downside in terms of home working. So for every person in their lovely home office popping to their kitchen for coffee and sitting out in the garden, there's a young person sitting on a bed in a house in a shared room with their laptop balanced on their knee trying to work from home, or a mother trying to do her job alongside homeschooling her children, or even worse, the real darker side of the kind of lockdown and pandemic, someone in an abusive relationship for whom the workplace had been their only refuge, and now they had to be trapped at home effectively with their abuser. And we saw some really shocking rises in domestic abuse rates during the pandemic. And now with post-pandemic, we see employers... sorry. Got some side noise. Now we're seeing post-pandemic, we're seeing some employers, right, everyone back in the workplace, no exceptions, everybody back, home working is over. And other employers saying everyone needs to work from home now, and we're selling off all the buildings. And where we need to be is somewhere in the middle, where there is a flexibility, and that's the really key word, that working at home and having some office location, the kind of agile working may well be the way forward in the future. But what it really needs to be is working where workers have some sense of agency and control, so that it works for them as well as working for an employer. And very importantly, that right to switch off as well, so that you are not effectively living in your workplace and available 24/7. The who that we learned, who are our key workers. I mean, in an economy, everybody contributes to creating value and making an economy successful. So all workers contribute to that. But who's important to keep a society running, not just an economy, but a society running? And we learnt who our key workers were, and the obvious ones are our NHS workers and social care and schools. But shop workers and distribution workers kept the food system working. Sewerage workers, everyone thinks I did a quiz for people about who had to self-isolate or not coming back from abroad. And actually sewerage workers were in the groups of people who didn't have to self-isolate after travel, because they are so important for keeping things going, if you know what I mean. So actually having a sense of who is really important. Nobody said, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? We haven't got any hedge fund people at work. Those people who do often the lowest paid jobs in our society turned out to be the ones who kept us going when we needed them most. And so moving on now to what we pay people, and particularly those people, those key workers. One thing we learned in the pandemic is how important decent sick pay is. So we had people working in residential care homes who had symptoms, who were told to self-isolate, who knew that they would not be able to pay their bills if they just were to rely on statutory sick pay. And also at the same time, so if you're a cook in the care home, you have to self-isolate, you'll get £95 a week of statutory sick pay. But you might see a cook in a restaurant across the road who's on 80% of their pay due to the furlough scheme, which is absolutely right and proper. But someone who's doing a really essential frontline job, not getting that support, was a huge sense. There was a huge sense of unfairness from those groups of workers. And similarly, decent levels of pay to keep an economy going. There are so many people who, when they had to take unpaid leave, our system for paying people, people living on wages where there is no resilience, no contingency whatsoever. So losing a week's work made a huge difference to them. And we also need to think about those people who were shielding, who were told to shield. We had many employers saying to those workers, well, you'll just have to take unpaid leave for 6 months. Again, that would have a catastrophic effect, potentially making those people homeless. So where is the system in our society for making sure that when we face these challenges like a pandemic, that we're looking after the most vulnerable and the people who keep our society going? So moving forward, we really need to have a sense of what does a good flexible working policy look like? But how do we reward and pay people better in our society? Not just paying them the minimum wage, but paying them a wage that means that they can live reasonably, that they can have a decent life. And how do we pay people to make sure that they can deal with the contingencies of life, having to take sick pay, having to shield, pregnant workers, decent maternity leave? So there's a real lesson from this pandemic, and the lesson will not be learned of, people will be rewarded by clapping or, getting a little badge or a nice medal or some nice words from a politician. People need real rewards, decent pay, decent conditions, and a flexible future that means where they work and how they work suits them as much as suiting their employer. So thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jo. So we haven't got an awful lot of time, but I'd just like to ask maybe one question of people who are still here on the panel. And also, for the Southwest, I'm from the Civil Service Union, PCS myself, and one of the things that we have been having over the last few years for a good long time is that move of good civil service jobs in the Southwest, which were formerly based in towns all over the place, being moved into hubs, so perhaps all of them going to Bristol, and there's just a plethora of things that are wrong with that and that aren't so good. So I think one of the things I really hope that will come out of this, and I know it's already happened in the Southwest, is people being able to work much more remotely and to keep their local communities going. But a point that you were saying actually about wage for young people, especially as someone who joined the Southwest TUC originally as a young member, one of the big things was that actual shock that just through being a few years younger, the minimum wage for you can be so much different than it is for someone a few years older. And the minimum wage as it is far too low. So the actual lowering of minimum wage for someone who's 18 because someone somewhere thinks that their shopping or their rent costs less is absurd. So I don't know who's on the panel, but if you could talk to me about the minimum wage, your thoughts on that, how we can get those jobs to the real living wage in the Southwest especially.
Well, firstly we need to. Sorry, yeah. Firstly, we need to call out the Tories for fibbing about the living wage. I mean, the audacity for them to introduce what they called the living wage. Sorry, once again, shush, darling. To call out the living wage for it not to be an actual living wage is outrageous. And they continue to say it was the Tories that introduced the living wage, and it's not a living wage. And also their calculations of these things don't seem to factor in any assessment about how much it actually costs to live in places. So for many of my constituents in Bristol, where house prices are kind of going through the roof, both to buy and to rent, okay, no, sorry. It means that people can't afford to live here when they have absolutely the right to do so, and pay needs to reflect that. Okay, I'm going to hand over and get rid of these two. Sorry.
Maybe I can come in and
learn what they've got coming. So hello to them. And I hope
stressed about the lack of a minimum wage for young people, and quite rightly so. I think, as Hannah was saying, your shopping doesn't cost less if you happen to be under 25. Your rent doesn't cost less. We have seen the age at which the national living wage kicks in fall to 23 this year, and the Low Pay Commission, which, full disclosure, I sit on as the TUC representative, has said it will fall to 21. But we know that's not fast enough for many, many young people, as Hannah said. And we know that even if we got that youth rate up to 891, it's not going to do that much for the many people who are struggling on those kind of levels of pay. And I think it's really important that we remember that it is young people who've been hit hardest by the crisis. They've experienced the greatest rates of unemployment, the greatest rates of job loss, and it's often young people also who are on the sharp end of those poor terms and conditions, 0 hours contracts, lack of sick pay. And I think, you know, the need to build back better is absolutely vital for young people, and raising their wages to a real living wage, and we mean a real living wage, would be a very good start.
Thank you so much, Kate. And is there anybody else on the Zoom?
Anna, can I come in? This is Dan here.
Please do.
I just want to say about
Yes.
the living wage, minimum wage. We need to work together like never before in the labour and trade union movement. That's what we've got to do. Our messaging has to get out there. I think we've got such a strong case if people can hear it, and we mustn't stop looking inwards at ourselves. We've got to look outwards to the people we're concerned about, the communities we care about, and get those strong messages across. I think it's understandable given what's happened in recent years, particularly the very disappointing general election result in 2019. But we have got to turn it around and work in genuine solidarity, like our history tells us is important, so that we can get these messages out there. If we do that, I think we're back on course, but we've got to do it.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Dan. And Jo.
I mean, I think a living wage is really important. So I'm just waiting for some of the feedback to stop. Living wage, so that it is, you know, the foundation level, so that you can pay your bills. You are not reliant on in-work benefits. But I think we shouldn't always forget about the other things like sick pay, like decent conditions, having a safe workplace as well. You know, work should be a place that you go to you know, help the organisation be successful, but also to thrive and learn and develop. And I just think, you know, we should want so much better for workers, and we've seen, you know, the really miserable lives that people have led in work. You know, the jobs that were most impacted by COVID, like security and social care. You know, people leading really difficult, you know, often feeling quite hopeless lives. And I just think we need to make the world work so much better in the future, because we deserve it and we can afford it as one of the biggest economies.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things. This year we know that more billionaires have been made than ever, whilst other people are suffering so much. And that's something that the South West TUC are really going to be working hard on this year. Recognition for people to get better pay, the living wage and sick pay is our priority this year. So we've got 2 minutes. I think I'm just about in time to say thank you so much to our panelists. Really appreciate you being with us and speaking so beautifully. Sorry for the technical difficulties, and if you were, I was slightly confusing at some points, but I think we got the point across, and I think it's been a good start to the day. So thank you very much to everyone who's joined us online. Please do engage with us on social media, tweet, and join us throughout the rest of the day and the weekend, and we'll see you at the next one. Thank you.